item that started it all. Robert E. Lee. A man that lost the war, a man that deserves no recognition, a man that stood for oppressing people of color. There you have it, General Robert E. Lee. I have never known second place to win a prize.
Oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people.
McIntyre's a donor from UVA. He had a lot of land around here. It was in like the 1920s. He donated lots of land, and this was one of the lots he donated, and he asked for black people not to be allowed on the space, and they said you can't do that. So he instead put a Confederate monument because he knew that that would deter black people from coming into the space, and donated it with the KKK surrounding it. That's there's historical documents of that. I think even presenting that to people don't know this history. Simple as that. And we have buildings named after these racist people who built Charlottesville. So our whole community has been built on racist ideals. And Thomas Jefferson, this is his town.
Now, after World War II, they removed all of Hitler's statues. They removed all the imagery of the Holocaust. But here, people of color have to literally look at this every day. Something that stood for the oppressing of our ancestors, Indians, blacks, poor whites. This is what we have to deal with. But I feel like he needs to go as well. In a museum, if you want to tell the story of history, go to a museum and see him. He does not belong here. This was a thriving black community, and you put a statue that stood for the oppressing of black people. That's disrespect, pure disrespect.
Get him off! Get him off the time!
It was a weekend of street battles and stark displays of racism, exploding into a deadly act.
One of the scariest aspects of what happened in Charlottesville in the summer of 2017 was that you had hundreds of neo-Nazis and white supremacists coming to Charlottesville to protest, exercising that right of free speech, while also being able to exercise their right to bear arms. To me, that was a huge problem. And I saw it with my own eyes. Just guns and guns and more guns. I've never seen so many guns. And then even this past weekend in Charlottesville, when they really kind of almost locked down the downtown area, there was a published list of all the things that you cannot bring into downtown Charlottesville, like skateboards or razors or flagpoles or knives, but you could still bring a gun.
I think the intensity took me by surprise. Actually, it wasn't even who came, it was how the police reacted that really took me by surprise. Just the stand down and watching people fighting.
Why haven't you guys intervened in any of the fighting? The police are refusing to answer my question as to why they haven't intervened in the fighting. Why haven't you guys arrested anyone for the fighting?
And then people fighting racists were labeled as, as criminals also, and there were court trials that people went through that, when you're fighting the same war that our ancestors fought in Germany here, and then being labeled a criminal, to me was mind-blowing.
I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Lives matter! White lives matter! I promise this is our town now!
Blood and soil. Jews will not replace us. Jews will not erase us. White power. They were calling the N-word. It was so much that was used that day. It was so much violence that went on that day. It was just so much to really intake.
We could very clearly see it on the ground, what was going on, but the fact that nobody else understood that people came to our city to attack us.
We are on 4th Street. This is where the car basically plowed all the BLM members that were walking and protesting. And so
How crowded was it here?
he got to about here and backed up and then came full force down this street. And there were cars that were parked at the stop sign to go through. And those cars kind of smashed one another due to impact. And this is where Heather Heyer died. This is 4th Street.
I don't think people understood why they came and what they were doing, and it worked. They were inducing fear.
This is where people just come and write like feelings like no time for hate, spread love. Yes, someone lost their life that day. And I don't want to take anything away from Heather because she was out here definitely fighting for Black Lives Mattering. So she did believe that Black Lives Matter. However, we cannot move away from what really was the issues happening in Charlottesville that led up to August the 12th. And so while we sometimes hear the story fade away and go towards Heather Heyer, that wasn't the nature of the fight. 2 officers lost their life, but 26 people were also injured that we never hear about. So we just need people that when they tell the story, that we're not continuing on white supremacy and giving whitewash history.
I'm Rachel Schmelkin, and I'm one of the rabbis at Congregation Beth Israel in Charlottesville, Virginia. Our community and the African American community knew that we had to come together in order to stand up to this hate, and that we really had a lot of power when we come together. You know, I'm thinking about Black friends of mine, Black clergy colleagues, who offered to stand around the synagogue and protect us on August 12th. Over the past year, I did especially with high school students, we did a lot of debriefing what happened here, learning about anti-Semitism, talking about anti-Semitism and how to combat it. But I actually think that our congregation in particular has been much more focused on fighting racism and xenophobia than necessarily on specifically fighting anti-Semitism. And I think that because of the way that we've really learned about how anti-Semitism animates white supremacy and how anti-Semitism and racism are very much connected in their minds, that when you're fighting, you can't fight anti-Semitism without fighting racism, and you can't fight racism without fighting anti-Semitism.
In the days after what happened in Charlottesville, I think this is what happens when you have extremist, violent, terroristic elements that always had previously been at the margins, beyond the pale, they were invited into the mainstream of a modern political party. There was a kind of unholy alliance that was struck between this presidential campaign that wanted to use nationalism, white nationalism, for political benefit to win the presidency. So when you do that, no surprise then that they feel legitimated to come onto the mainstream stage. And that's how they described what was going to happen in Charlottesville. That was Unite the Right.
I think here in Charlottesville that we have a wonderful team and a blended team of people that work together in solidarity to fight these issues. I think that the Black community and the Jewish community here do believe in the fight. I know several Jewish people from Charlottesville that are definitely all about change and all about the fight for equality.
What happened here and what has happened since in Charlottesville is that people have shown up and confronted white supremacists and neo-Nazis wherever they show up. And Charlottesville has become a very miserable and uncomfortable place to be a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist. We have sent a clear message that they are not welcome here, and that they will not be able to just sneak by and hang out in Charlottesville.
You know, watching people come together to fight this was powerful, but it's not enough. It still has to be done on higher up levels. And for me, I had to realize that it was my white comfort to be able to choose when and where I could make a stand. And I had to realize that's not a choice for everybody.
I just don't think America is sorry for what it did to people of color. I don't think it's sorry for what it did to the Indians. I don't think it's sorry for the oppression that it caused to so many individuals. And symbols like this should make anybody feel some type of way when you know the nature of the why it happened, or the nature of why it's here, and the nature of who it's hurting. We can't put equality or say that we stand for equality and put equality in the same view of an image like Robert E. Lee.